the Armed Services Committee, who served as a lieutenant colonel in the U.S. National Guard. Senator Joni Ernst of Iowa, member of the Select Committee on Intelligence and the Armed Services Committee. Republican Senator Tom Cotton of Arkansas also with us.
Did a little service himself.
Yes, he did. Professor of Political Science and director of the Institute for International Studies at Stanford University, former ambassador to Russia, Michael
You know, this would be a
McFaul.
perfect time to talk about Russia, but first, we need to talk about Joni Ernst.
Yes.
She is not happy this morning, Tom Cotton.
I'm
not
a fan of
happy
Joni
at all.
Ernst. Why is she not happy?
Well, she kind of feels like I felt after Alabama didn't win the national championship.
What?
We're supposed to win the national. That's what we do. Tom, why is Joni upset this morning?
What happened? What'd you do?
Well, we're very excited in the South to have Sonny Perdue as the new Secretary of Agriculture. After about 25 years, it's good to have a Southern Secretary of Agriculture.
But Joni wants one from the Midwest.
I
right?
understand.
We have great agriculture in the Midwest, but
You're absolutely right.
You know, we're looking forward to vetting Sonny Perdue. I'm excited to meet him, and I'm going to be quizzing him.
You'll have an open mind.
The vetting.
The vetting
This
process.
sounds tough. She's going to ask like Big Ten football
what she's
history
talking
of
about,
Sonny.
too, isn't it?
Exactly.
Right. I know a little something about agriculture.
So the cloud hanging over Donald Trump as he becomes president of the United States, especially when it comes to foreign policy, has to do with Russia. Obviously, a lot of unanswered questions, but also a lot of unanswered questions, Senator, about how the Russians hacked us in the first place. You got onto the Obama administration back in the early spring.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's good to see the Democrats have discovered their inner Cold Warrior after so many years, because Vladimir Putin didn't think the Cold War ever ended. He didn't think they lost. He just thought they were behind at halftime, and they've been making up ground now for 17 years. Russia is not our friend. Vladimir Putin is not our friend. And for a long time, we've needed to take a firmer line, draw more boundaries, and take a tougher approach towards them.
Well, on that note, on the morning of Donald Trump's inauguration, there are new reports that allege the FBI, aided by the NSA and CIA and Treasury Department, are reviewing intercepted communications and financial transactions between Russian officials and associates of the Trump campaign. The New York Times released the report, citing anonymous sources saying the investigation centers in part on Trump's former campaign chairman, Paul Manafort, who has done business in Ukraine and Russia, and who, according to the report, had contacts abroad that were under surveillance by the National Security Agency for suspected links to Russia's Federal Security Service, the successor of the KGB. Last night, Manafort denied contact with the Russian government or Russian officials. The report says the ties of two other Trump campaign associates are being looked at. Carter Page, a businessman and former foreign policy advisor to the campaign, and Roger Stone, a longtime Republican operative. Stone says it's false.
Senator, how much of a concern do you and other Republicans have with the Russian connection for either Donald Trump or members of Donald Trump's team?
Well, one, I think it has to be looked at. Of course, it has to be looked at. My concern, of course, is with the Russian hacking. That we know happened. So reports will come out. Investigations will be done. It is concerning because, you know what, now Donald Trump is our president as of today, this at noon. So he will need to understand that America is number one. America, bottom line, America.
Do you agree with the senator that Vladimir Putin is not a friend? He's an adversary.
I absolutely agree.
He's working
with
against
the senator.
America's interests every day.
I absolutely agree with that. Vladimir Putin is not our friend. He has never been our friend. And we need to watch America's back. We need to maintain, of course, a relationship with Russia, but it needs to be one of strength. And
Based on a framework of requirements.
Absolutely.
Mr.
Why don't we ask Mike how he and his personnel in his embassy were treated, if you want to know it.
You're right.
How'd that go for you?
Tell us about that.
Well, we can talk about that, but I just want to note for the record, we got a lot of bipartisan support about how to think about Vladimir Putin. The one guy we need to know where he comes down, of course, is the president-elect, soon to be the president, because what he's said up to this point is at odds with what I think a lot of people who work on national security think.
Yeah.
The second thing, what you just reported in the New York Times, this is a very serious deal. I mean, this means to say that people are listening to intercepts of U.S. citizens, that means that they've gone deep into this investigation. They went before a FISA court. It doesn't mean anybody's guilty. I want to be clear about that. It doesn't, just because you have an investigation doesn't mean anything wrong. Well, there's a lot of questions about what these ties were, what was promised. I don't want to believe it, to be honest, especially on Inauguration Day, but we need to know the answers. We need to know the depth of these contacts.
So we certainly know that everybody around the table here certainly shares my concerns with Vladimir Putin and Russia and all of our concerns about. Let's look at it a different way. What opportunities are there in a relationship? Donald Trump says maybe a new opening towards Russia gives us an opportunity. Others have said if it counterbalances China's influence, just like Kissinger thought in 71, 72, maybe that helps. What are some of the possibilities of a warmer relationship with Russia?
So I do think there are possibilities, and I think there's a honeymoon period now. It's just how will the president and his administration use it? The problem so far is he's defined good relations as his goal. Good relations should never be the goal of foreign policy. That's the means to other things. But when you get into their list, it gets a little complicated. Putin is not going to balance with us against China, his closest partner in the world today. With respect to ISIS, that has been floated. Let's fight ISIS together. Well, we've been fighting ISIS for a couple of years now in Syria and Iraq. Russia has chosen not to join that fight. So the list is actually, I think, pretty short in terms of what we can accomplish with Putin today.
I'd ask both senators on armed services about something that Rex Tillerson said at his hearing, his confirmation hearing to be Secretary of State, which was that he would support arming the Ukrainians against Russia. Is that something you'd support, Senator Ernst?
I do support that. I do support giving them the means to not only defend themselves, but protect their families. It's very, very important that we do that. And I've been supportive of that measure for the last 2 years. I think it is something that we need to act on.
Why do you suspect we haven't done that, Senator?
Well, the president has opposed it. It was bipartisan, got bipartisan support in the Senate Armed Services Committee. But I would say that's just one example.
Why did the president oppose that?
You know, I think he feared that it might escalate. I've heard that he told people around him he wasn't willing to risk nuclear war for Ukraine.
We should only now that he's doing things that actually we were saying a year and a half ago he should do, which was put troops into Poland.
Yeah.
You want to go into Ukraine? We're going to do more military exercises in Poland.
Providing weapons to Ukraine or putting troops in Poland is just one example of how we can put pressure in so many different points on Russia and Vladimir Putin. Like, I also, in the intelligence bill last year, tried to hire American citizens in our embassy in Moscow as opposed to employing local citizens, trying to enforce travel restrictions in Washington on Russian spies. The administration opposed that. There's a whole host of things that we can do to put more pressure on Moscow and therefore negotiate with them from a position of strength the way Ronald Reagan did with the Soviets. The last three presidents, unfortunately, have been wrong-footed by Vladimir Putin every time they tried to go to him with an open hand.
I'd love to get all of your senses on Donald Trump's position on NATO or the several positions he's put out there. Is it obsolete, Joni Ernst?
I don't know that it is obsolete, and I think we've seen pushback from Nikki Haley on this very topic as well. But I'm actually excited about that because it does show that he is surrounding himself with people that do have opposing views, especially on NATO, other areas like that, that makes him a better informed leader. I'd rather see a lot of discussion about that rather than everybody following.
Nikki Haley, Rex Tillerson, General Mattis. I love General Mattis's line, if NATO didn't exist, we would have to create it.
Yeah, no, I agree with what I agree with what Donald Trump said about NATO and its relationship to Russia in that interview.
No, it wasn't. Don't worry. I got you, Tom Cotton.
He said that NATO is very important to me.
Yeah.
And, you know, as I've traveled, you know, in Europe the last couple years, a lot of the time with Mike Pompeo is going to be the CIA director. You talk to these defense ministers, and they all recognize that they need to do more to support our common defense and also support their own defense. They're all increasing their budgets now.
And Mr. Ambassador, there has been, as we sit here and talk about the importance of NATO, there has been resentment growing in Middle America, whether it's in their home states or even in my district. People used to always ask, why are we carrying the load for everybody? Why are we carrying the load for Germany? Why are we carrying the load for Britain? Why are we carrying the load for Japan? We're carrying the load for our economic rivals. And so it's not like this.
There are economic trading partners, though, too.
Oh, I know that. I'm just telling you what you hear in town hall meetings.
I was in Montana 2 weeks ago. They say the same in Montana.
So it's not like this has come out of nowhere.
Correct. This has been an issue for several administrations. By the way, NATO has been addressing it. They want all countries to get to 2%. That's a good goal.
And they're on their way.
And they're on their way. But NATO is not obsolete. That phrase makes our NATO allies nervous. I too have heard lots of great things in testimony, and my colleague from Stanford, General Mattis, I know what he thinks about NATO. We need the president now to say those things. He needs to assure our NATO allies that it's not obsolete. Tragically, because of Vladimir Putin, it's now needed more than ever.
Okay, so
All right,
Senators
guys.
Joni Ernst and Tom Cotton, thank you both
so
very
much.
much. Really great to
Don't
see
worry.
you. Thank
the
you.
guy from the South will be okay.
Come back on the show. Let's keep the conversation going. Ambassador Michael McFaul, thank you
Thank
as
you.
well.
Thanks for
Great to
having me.
have you back.
Thank you,
Coming up,
Ambassador.
the top Democrats in the House.